The Appalachian foothills hold many secrets, but none quite like the one that unfolded in the shadows of its ancient trees. Madison Wheeler, a woman who found solace in nature despite the unpredictability of her own life, never imagined that one fateful day the wilderness would offer her a bond that defied all logic. When a fragile bobcat kitten, abandoned and weak, crossed her path, it seemed like another challenge for Madison to face. But as she fought to save him, little did she know that the true test of survival would not be the kitten's, but her own. What happens when the lines between life and death blur, and a creature bound to the wild steps in to make a difference? This is a story of rescue, survival, and the mysterious ties that bind us to the creatures of the earth in ways we may never fully understand. The early morning mist clung to the Appalachian foothills of western North Carolina like a gossamer veil, transforming the dense forest into a mysterious realm of shadows and whispers. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for more amazing stories. Madison Wheeler adjusted her backpack and checked her GPS coordinates one last time before venturing deeper into the wilderness. At 32, she had spent countless hours exploring these remote trails, finding solace in the untamed beauty of nature. Despite, or perhaps because of her epilepsy diagnosis 12 years ago, the condition had altered the trajectory of her life, forcing her to abandon her dreams of becoming a wilderness guide. Yet, rather than letting it defeat her, Madison had adapted. She now worked as a freelance nature photographer, selling her work to outdoor magazines and maintaining a popular blog about accessible hiking trails for people with various health conditions. Her motto was simple: nature doesn't discriminate. It welcomes everyone who respects its rules. That morning in early May, Madison had set out to photograph spring wildflowers for an upcoming article. The weather was perfect, overcast, but dry, with just enough light filtering through the clouds to create the soft illumination she preferred for her macro shots. She had already captured some stunning images of trillium and wild geranium when a sound caught her attention, a weak, plaintive mewing that seemed out of place in these woods. Madison paused, her hand instinctively moving to the medical alert bracelet on her wrist, a habit she'd developed whenever something unexpected occurred. The sound came again, this time slightly clearer. It reminded her of a domestic kitten, but she knew she was too far from any residential areas for that to be likely. Following the noise with cautious steps, she pushed through a thick patch of mountain laurel. There, in a shallow depression beneath a fallen log, lay a sight that made her heart skip a beat. A baby bobcat, no more than a few weeks old. Its spotted fur was matted, and its tiny body trembled with each labored breath. Madison knew immediately something was wrong. Bobcat kittens rarely strayed from their mothers at this age, and this one showed signs of distress, dehydration, weakness, and what appeared to be an injury to one of its hind legs. Years of outdoor experience had taught Madison when to intervene and when to let nature take its course. She scanned the area for signs of the mother or siblings, but found none. Instead, she discovered traces of a recent landslide about 50 yards uphill. Fresh earth and broken branches told a story of destruction that had likely separated this kitten from its family. "Hey there, little one," Madison whispered, keeping her voice soft and steady as she slowly removed her outer fleece jacket. "Let's get you some help." Using skills learned from various wilderness first aid courses, she carefully wrapped the kitten in her jacket, noting how it offered surprisingly little resistance, a concerning sign of its weakened state. The tiny predator's eyes, though glazed with exhaustion, fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to her soul. "I'm going to call you Dakota," she murmured, the name coming to her spontaneously as she thought of the dignity and resilience of the Native American tribes who had once called these mountains home. "It means friend or ally, and right now, that's exactly what you need. Madison knew she had to act quickly. The nearest wildlife sanctuary was an hour's drive away, and the kitten's condition appeared critical. She activated her phone's GPS, grateful for the signal strength, and began the careful journey back to her Subaru Outback, parked at a remote trailhead. The drive to Blue Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary was tense, with Madison frequently glancing at the makeshift nest she'd created in a cardboard box on her passenger seat. She'd managed to get a few drops of water into the kitten, using the squeeze bottle from her hiking pack, but Dakota's breathing remained shallow and rapid. The sanctuary sat at the end of a long gravel road, its wooden buildings blending harmoniously with the surrounding forest. As Madison pulled up to the main office, a tall figure emerged from the doorway, a man in his mid-30s wearing olive green cargo pants and a navy blue polo shirt with the sanctuary's logo. "I got your call," he said, striding quickly to her car. "I'm Carson Matthews, the senior wildlife rehabilitator here." His voice was warm but professional, his movements efficient as he helped Madison carefully remove the box containing Dakota. Carson's initial examination of the Bobcat kitten was thorough and gentle. "Male, probably about 4 weeks old," he muttered, more to himself than to Madison. "Severe dehydration, possible fracture in the left hind leg, and what looks like the early stages of pneumonia." He glanced up at Madison, his green eyes serious but kind. "You did the right thing bringing him in. Another day out there, and he wouldn't have made it." Over the next several hours, Madison watched as Carson and the sanctuary's veterinarian worked to stabilize Dakota. She filled out paperwork, provided detailed information about where she'd found the kitten, and answered countless questions about the condition in which she'd discovered him. "You know," Carson said as they watched Dakota receive fluids through an IV, "most people would have either left him there or tried to keep him as a pet. Both would have been death sentences. You showed remarkable judgment." Madison smiled, touched by the compliment, but more concerned about the tiny patient. "Will he make it?" Carson's expression was cautiously optimistic. "His vitals are improving, and he's responding well to the antibiotics. The next 48 hours will be crucial, but I think he's got a fighting chance." He paused, studying Madison's face. "You're welcome to come back and check on him. We always appreciate when rescuers take a genuine interest in the animal's recovery." That was how it began. Madison's regular visits to Blue Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary to monitor Dakota's progress. Each visit revealed not only the Bobcat's growing strength, but also Carson's remarkable dedication to his work. She learned that he had given up a lucrative career in environmental law to pursue his true passion for wildlife rehabilitation, taking courses in veterinary medicine and animal behavior to better serve the creatures in his care. Dakota's recovery was gradual but steady. His leg healed cleanly thanks to Carson's skilled care, and his pneumonia responded well to treatment. As the weeks passed, Madison found herself spending more time at the sanctuary, volunteering to help with other animals and learning about wildlife rehabilitation from Carson. Their shared passion for nature and animal welfare sparked countless conversations that often stretched late into the evening. Carson was fascinated by Madison's photography work and her determination to make outdoor experiences accessible to people with medical conditions. In turn, Madison was drawn to his gentle strength and the way he approached each injured animal with equal measures of compassion and respect. "You know what I love about this work," Carson said one evening as they watched Dakota, now nearly recovered, practicing his hunting skills with a training toy. "Every animal that comes through here has a story, a fight for survival. When we help them return to the wild, we're not just saving individual creatures, we're maintaining the balance of the entire ecosystem." Madison nodded, understanding completely. "It's like my epilepsy, in a way," she replied thoughtfully. "When I was first diagnosed, I thought my life in the outdoors was over. But instead, I found new ways to connect with nature, to tell its stories through my camera lens. Sometimes limitations just lead us to different paths. Their first kiss happened naturally, almost inevitably one sunset, as they released a rehabilitated barred owl back into the wild. The bird's silent flight into the gathering dusk seemed to mirror the quiet way their hearts had found each other, gradually, been all at once. As their relationship deepened, Madison began spending more time at the sanctuary. She set up a small office in one of the auxiliary buildings, where she could work on her blog and photo editing while remaining close to both Carson and Dakota. The Bobcat kitten had grown into a healthy juvenile, but his release date kept being postponed due to various minor setbacks. "He's almost ready," Carson would say, "but his hunting success rate with live prey isn't quite where it should be, or we need to work a bit more on his fear response to larger predators." Madison suspected that Carson, like her, had grown attached to the fierce little cat who had brought them together, though they both knew release was the ultimate goal. Then came the morning that changed everything. Madison had been experiencing more frequent seizures in the preceding weeks, a fact she'd been reluctantly discussing with her neurologist. That day, she arrived at the sanctuary early, planning to photograph Dakota's training session for her blog. She remembered setting up her camera equipment, remembered Carson bringing her a cup of coffee, remembered the way the morning light slanted through the trees, and then nothing. Carson's account of what happened next would later fill in the terrifying gaps. He had been working with another rehabilitator when he heard the crash of equipment hitting the floor. He found Madison unconscious, her body rigid, her breathing shallow and irregular. Despite his first aid training and quick response, she showed no signs of recovery from what appeared to be a severe seizure. The paramedics arrived within 15 minutes, but their efforts to revive Madison seemed futile. Her vital signs were so faint as to be nearly undetectable. At the local hospital, after hours of attempted intervention, the attending physician made the devastating pronouncement: Madison Wheeler had passed away. The medical examiner cited complications from an epileptic seizure as the cause of death. Carson, grief-stricken and in shock, took charge of the funeral arrangements, knowing from their many conversations that Madison had wanted a green burial wand that would return her body to the nature she had so loved. The service was scheduled for 3 days later at Green Haven Natural Cemetery, a beautiful property adjacent to National Forest land. Carson had arranged for Madison's simple pine coffin to be placed beneath a mature white oak tree, its branches spreading protectively overhead like embracing arms. The morning of the funeral dawned clear and cool, with a hint of autumn in the air, despite the late summer date. Friends, family, and members of the local outdoor community gathered to pay their respects. Carson stood quietly by the coffin, his heart heavy with unspoken words and unrealized dreams. Then, something extraordinary happened, something that would later be described as either a miracle or a testament to the mysterious bonds between humans and animals. Dakota, who had been secured in his rehabilitation enclosure at the sanctuary 3 miles away, somehow managed to escape. Sanctuary staff would later find a small gap in the enclosure roof, though how the Bobcat had reached it remained a mystery. The first indication of Dakota's presence at the funeral was a rustle in the underbrush, followed by the appearance of the young Bobcat himself, now nearly full-grown. Before anyone could react, he padded silently to Madison's coffin and lay down beside it, his tawny fur brushing against the light wood. Initial attempts to remove him were met with low growls, not aggressive, but clearly communicating his intention to stay. Carson, recognizing something in the cat's behavior that he couldn't quite explain, called off the attempts. "Let him be," he said softly. "He's saying goodbye in his own way." But Dakota didn't leave. After the service, as the hours passed and the funeral attendees gradually departed, the Bobcat remained, his eyes fixed on the coffin with an unwavering intensity that Carson had only seen once before, when Madison had first brought him to the sanctuary, fighting for his life. It was this unusual behavior that finally triggered something in Carson's memory, a case study he'd read during his veterinary training about animals detecting physiological changes in humans. With trembling hands, he called 911. "This is going to sound crazy," he told the dispatcher, "but I need emergency medical personnel at Greenhaven Natural Cemetery immediately. I think we may have made a terrible mistake." Paramedics arrived to find an extraordinary scene: a full-grown bobcat guarding a coffin and a distraught man insisting they check for signs of life. To their credit, they agreed to investigate, though their expressions suggested they were merely humoring him. What they discovered would later be documented in medical journals. Madison was alive, trapped in a state of catalepsy, a rare condition that can accompany severe seizures, causing such profound muscle rigidity and reduced vital signs that it can be mistaken for death. The condition was so unusual that the initial medical team had missed it, and only Dakota's acute senses had detected the faint signs of life that human instruments had failed to register. Madison was rushed to the regional medical center, where specialized treatment gradually brought her back to consciousness. Her first clear memory was of Carson's face, tears streaming down his cheeks as he held her hand, and the strange but comforting knowledge that somewhere nearby, a bobcat named Dakota had refused to let her go. The recovery process was long and complex. Madison's neurologist adjusted her medication regimen and implemented new monitoring protocols to prevent future episodes of catalepsy. Throughout her hospital stay, Carson remained by her side, dividing his time between caring for her and managing the sanctuary. Dakota, meanwhile, had been safely returned to his enclosure at the sanctuary, though his behavior had changed subtly. He seemed more settled, more ready for the independence of life in the wild, as if his role in saving Madison had marked a turning point in his own journey toward release. 2 months after her near burial, Madison stood with Carson at the edge of a remote clearing in the national forest, watching as Dakota took his first steps toward true freedom. The bobcat paused at the forest's edge, turning to look back at them one last time. In that moment, Madison felt she could read the message in his golden eyes. Some bonds transcend the boundaries between species, between life and death, between wild and tame. As Dakota disappeared into the undergrowth, Carson wrapped his arm around Madison's shoulders. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in all my years of wildlife rehabilitation, I've never seen anything like what happened with him. It's as if he was meant to find you that day in the woods, meant to be there when you needed him most." Madison leaned into Carson's embrace, her camera capturing one last photo of the space where Dakota had vanished. "I used to think I rescued him," she replied, "but now I'm not so sure who rescued whom." The story of Madison, Carson, and Dakota became something of a legend in wildlife rehabilitation. Circles a reminder that the connections between humans and animals run deeper than science can fully explain. Madison's blog post about the experience went viral, bringing attention to both epilepsy awareness and the importance of wildlife sanctuaries. 1 year later, Carson proposed to Madison in the same clearing where they had released Dakota. As they stood there, sharing their plans for a future together, a familiar figure emerged briefly from the shadows, a healthy adult bobcat, his spotted coat gleaming in the dappled sunlight. He regarded them calmly for a moment, before melting back into his forest home, a living reminder that love, in all its forms, has the power to bridge the gap between life and death, between wild and domestic, between what we can explain and what we can only feel in our hearts. Madison and Carson were married the following spring in a small ceremony at the sanctuary. Their vows included a promise to continue their work protecting and rehabilitating wildlife, honoring the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. They established a foundation dedicated to supporting wildlife rehabilitation centers and promoting research into the connection between animals and human health. Occasionally, sanctuary staff would report glimpses of a large bobcat in the surrounding forest, one that seemed to watch their work with unusual interest. Whether it was Dakota or not, these sightings served as a reminder that some stories don't end. They simply change form, like the seasons, like life itself, creating new chapters in the endless cycle of nature's narrative. Years later, when visitors to the sanctuary would ask about the framed photograph hanging in the main office, the one showing a bobcat lying guard over a simple pine coffin, Madison would smile and tell them that sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't between humans at all, but between all living creatures who share this remarkable planet. And in the distance, if they listened carefully, they might hear the wild cry of a bobcat, reminding them that miracles can wear fur and walk on four legs, and that the heart's capacity for love knows no bounds. Binding bonds through beautiful tales. Thank you for watching.